Hello, I'm Elise Poyam, registered dietitian. Welcome to another nutrition class. Today, our topic is going to be inflammation and the anti-inflammatory diet. Our objectives are going to be to explain what is inflammation. Uh, you should understand the role that inflammation plays in the disease development by the end of this presentation. You should also understand how nutrition influences inflammation and be able to identify anti-inflammatory and inflammatory foods. Doctors have known for years that foods you eat can have an impact on your overall health and wellness. But there's been plenty of talk recently about the perks of going on an anti inflammatory diet to try to tamp down on the inflammation in your body. So, there are a couple of different types of inflammation. The first type of inflammation is the body's response to an injury as it works to heal itself. For an example, if you cut your finger may become inflamed, red, swollen, while it's healing. This is a good type of inflammation. However, inflammation can become problematic when it starts even when there's not an injury. This is called chronic inflammation. It can increase your risk of health problems, including cancer and heart disease. While you can't control all of the inflammation in your body, there's been some research to suggest that eating certain foods may help to reduce the inflammation in your body. That's where the anti inflammatory diet comes in. An anti inflammatory diet is the selection of foods that reduce the chronic inflammatory response while allowing you to consume the appropriate nutrition that you need for good health. So before we get going, let's test your knowledge. Using vegetable oil may increase inflammation in your body, true or false? This is going to be false. Vegetable oil is an inflammatory food. And by the end of this presentation, you'll understand why. And also, I'll give you alternatives to using vegetable oil in your regular diet. So, here's some signs of chronic inflammation. One big one is persistent pain for no apparent reason. Chronic fatigue is really, really common. Uh, Joint stiffness and swelling, some skin problems, uh, even depression with some people, gastrointestinal problems like constipation, diarrhea, or reflux happen some with some people, um, as well as unintentional weight gain or weight loss and frequent colds. The thing about chronic inflammation is that there are no real set of signs or symptoms that a doctor can say, okay, based on the fact that you have swollen ankles, I can diagnose you with chronic inflammation. That's not how it works. A lot of the symptoms of chronic inflammation could be a lot of other things. So what doctors usually do is kind of use a process of elimination. And if after various tests and after they verify that you don't have other problems, then they may be able to conclude that you may have chronic inflammation. So we'll go over some foods that could help if you have chronic inflammation, but also keep in mind that if you do not have chronic inflammation, um, these foods that we're going to talk about are healthy for anybody. Yeah, it's a real good idea to consume more foods that are anti-inflammatory. So we'll go over each food group and I'll point out to you which foods that you want to include frequently and which foods you want to limit in your diet based on whether they're inflammatory or inflammatory foods. So the foods you eat can increase or decrease inflammation. Excess calories from sugar, saturated fat, and trans fats may also increase inflammation. So we're going to just take a look at different types of foods. Again, even if you don't have chronic inflammation, it would be a great idea to consume more anti-inflammatory foods. So let's start with the first food group. Under the protein group, well, first of all, we're going to look at different categories of foods. We're going to look at which foods are anti-inflammatory, which foods are neutral, meaning that they will not cause inflammation, but they also will not help uh, if you have inflammation. And then we'll look at foods that are inflammatory foods. Okay, so under the protein group or the meat group, salmon, sardines, herring fish, mackerel fish, trout, tuna are all great sources of anti-inflammatory foods. Also, some wild game, nuts and seeds are great. Nut butters like peanut butter is a good source. Most of your dried beans, peas, and lentils are a great source of anti-inflammatory food. Soy food, tofu, omega-3 egg yolks are all great. Some of your neutral protein or meat products would be chicken, turkey, and egg whites. And remember again, if the food's neutral, it means that it will not cause inflammation, but it also will not help if you have inflammation. Some of the foods that are inflammatory are beef, pork, lamb. Whole milk is an inflammatory product. It causes problems with a lot of people. Whole and sweetened yogurt is also inflammatory, as well as cheese and poultry skin. So chicken without the skin is neutral, but if you have chicken with the skin portion of it um, may increase the inflammation in your body. The next food group that we want to talk about are your carbohydrates. So some of the anti-inflammatory foods would be fruits, whether it's fresh, frozen, or canned. If they're canned, they should be canned in their own juices. Um, Berries are especially great anti-inflammatory foods. Berries like blueberries, strawberries, blackberries are all great, as well as apples. Citrus fruits are good. And then you have oats, quinoa, wheat, brown rice, barley are all uh, anti-inflammatory foods. So these are the foods that you want to include more frequently. Some of the neutral foods under this category will be 100% whole grain wheat. Again, this is a great food source, but as far as inflammation is concerned, they don't really have an effect um, on your inflammation. Also, whole wheat pasta, whole grain cereal, low fat milks, neutral, and also low fat and plain yogurt are all neutral. Some of your inflammatory foods will be your enriched flour foods. That could be like white bread. A lot of products that are made with flour, like cookies, cakes, a lot of cereals, also processed foods. Almost every presentation that I'm going to do over the next few months, I'm going to recommend that you limit processed foods because they are uh, bad in so many different ways. Processed foods definitely um, increase the inflammation in your body if that's a problem for you. Syrups and sugar can also increase, they're also inflammatory foods. So kind of be aware of that whole list of foods. The next category will be your non-starchy vegetables. Tomatoes are an excellent source of of an anti-inflammatory food. Also, your dark green leafy vegetables like collards or kale. Mushrooms are a good source. Broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, hot peppers, ginger are all great anti-inflammatory foods. Some of your neutral foods in the non-starchy vegetable category will be just other fresh or frozen vegetables and canned foods. If they're low sodium, will be neutral. For the inflammatory foods, you can see here that we have nothing listed because most fruits and vegetables are anti-inflammatory foods. So you want to just try to include as many fruits and vegetables as possible because they're going to work in your favor. Under the fat group, um, the anti-inflammatory foods will be ground flaxseed, uh, hemp seed, walnuts, almonds. Uh, Under oils, extra virgin olive oil is a great source, as well as canola oil, almond oil, flaxseed oil are all anti-inflammatory oils. Some of the neutral fats would be olives, avocados, other nuts besides walnuts and olives, um, other seeds, oils like sesame, peanut, and avocado. Your inflammatory fats would be foods like cream, butter, hydrogenated oils like margarine or fried foods. You really want to limit fried foods, but if you're going to have a fried food, if you skip down to the oils, you'll see corn oil, vegetable oil, cottonseed oil, sunflower oil are all inflammatory oils. So instead of using any of these type oils, you want to look back over to the anti-inflammatory group under oils. And you see canola oil here. If you're going to fry something, which should be very infrequently, I'd recommend that you use the canola oil instead of like the corn or vegetable oil there. But also buttery crackers are inflammatory foods, and definitely cookies and anything that's with a good amount of sugar would be inflammatory foods. For your for your beverages, of course, water is great in every category, but it's definitely an anti-inflammatory beverage. Each day you should drink several cups of water, a minimum of eight, if you're going to count, but you want to make water your primary beverage. So water every day. Some teas are anti-inflammatory. That does not mean you want to go out and buy all of these extremely expensive teas that are advertised. Just regular green tea is a great source of for inflammation. Some of your neutral products would be coffee is neutral. One glass of red wine would be fine. So one glass of wine is good. It's not going to help, or it shouldn't cause additional inflammation. But if you look over at the inflammatory beverages, you'll see excessive alcohol listed there. So no more than one glass of wine if you're going to have alcohol. Other inflammatory beverages would be soda. Uh, Soda could definitely cause inflammation. Juice drinks and energy drinks are all sources of our inflammatory drinks. So again, the big thing here is try to drink lots of water, um, and then limit some of the other sweetened drinks for sure. So, a couple of tips to fight against inflammation. You want to eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. We've talked about this in previous presentations. Every day, you want to try to get in a minimum of five fruits and vegetables. That's a minimum. And I would recommend more if possible. A good way to start here, and we've said this before, is just to try to include fruits or vegetables with each one of your meals. That will help. Couple with dinner, one with lunch, and one with breakfast. That's going to get you kind of close. So eat plenty of fruits and vegetables. That's your number one way to fight against inflammation. And remember, some of the signs of inflammation, the real common signs of inflammation are um, chronic pain for no apparent reason, uh, joint pain, joint swelling, um, and chronic fatigue are the real big ones. And sometimes people really have a lot of skin problems. But even again, if you're not experiencing any of these symptoms, the list of anti-inflammatory foods are just healthy for the average person. So you really want to try to include these foods into your diet as frequently as possible. You also want to limit your saturated fat. An easy way to remember which foods are saturated is just to remember that saturated fats come from animal products. Some of these animal products are better than others. Like, for example, red meats, of course, come from an animal, but chicken is a better source. So you want to limit the saturated fat in your diet. You want to increase the amount of fish. I've mentioned this before. Every day you want to have, I'm sorry, every week you want to have at least 2 servings of a fish product in your diet. And it would be great if it's the fattier fish like salmon or herring. Even trout's a great source, but fish in your diet at least twice a week. It would be great if you could have fish more frequently. Another area that you want to work on would be to choose whole grain products. And remember, whole grain foods are not anti-inflammatory foods, they're neutral. Uh, but for a lot of other reasons, for a lot of other health reasons, you definitely want to choose whole grain over like white bread and white flour products. You want to limit the amount of red meats. Um, I would say try to limit red meats to no more than twice a week would be excellent um, for your overall health. And this is for the average person. You want to limit red meats in your diet. A big one here is to limit processed foods. Processed foods will work against you in a number of ways. We've talked about processed foods in previous presentations. Remember, processed foods are foods that are just kind of ready to eat. They don't require you to do anything but maybe unwrap and put in the microwave, or unwrap and they're ready to eat. Um, a lot of these processed foods are um, have a lot of extra preservatives and additives and chemicals that you don't want to include in your diet frequently. So limit the processed foods as much as possible. You also want to limit the sodium. Our last presentation, we suggested that you limit sodium to about 2,000 milligrams per day, which is about the size of 1 teaspoon per day. And the thing about the sodium is that so many foods nowadays have added sodium. So even if you don't add any table salt, you're probably still going to get more than enough sodium in your diet. So limit the sodium. Try to buy low sodium products as much as possible. And the last thing under tips to fight against inflammation would be to get regular exercise. It's recommended that the average adult gets at least 3 days of exercise for about 30 minutes each time. So start out slow. Start out with walking 3 days a week. And if you can't do 30 minutes, start out with walking 10 minutes a day and build on that. The next, few days later, do 20 minutes a day, and just continue to build on that until you can get it up to at least 30 minutes 3 times a week is your minimum. It would be terrific if you can get that up to 4, but set goals and make sure that you try to include exercise into your weekly routine just for your overall health. All right, so a quick post test before we wrap up here. Which of the following foods are inflammatory foods? Would it be whole wheat bread, ground beef, collards, cookies, dried beans, or walnuts? Okay, so our answer will be uh, ground beef is a inflammatory food, and cookies are also an inflammatory food. We talked about how whole wheat breads are neutral. Collards, dried beans, and walnuts are an excellent source of for uh, they're excellent anti-inflammatory foods. So again, the answer is ground beef, and the cookies are inflammatory foods listed here. All right, so this concludes our short presentation here. I hope that you all were able to get some information that you're going to be able to use. Just keep in mind, though, that even if you don't have chronic inflammation, this information is good for just a general population. You really want to include as many anti-inflammatory foods as possible, just for your overall good health. All right, so until we talk again, I hope that you all have a great month. Goodbye.